in Baltimore and double. Ravens are not playing and are a little bit quiet before we head off to the draft 2 weeks from now in Indianapolis, or the Combine, I should say. But the Terps have been out on the hardwoods, and the Caps have been out on the ice. Neither one fared very well on Tuesday night. Luke Jones here to discuss all things Terps, as well as a little Orioles news, and, of course, the Ravens Hall of Fame game being announced. No shocker to anyone there, but one shocker for sure, Luke. I think all offseason and, for the Terps, we go through the football season. We say, well, we know they're not going to be any good at football. Then they lose their quarterbacks, and they have all these injuries, and they wind up being horrible. The basketball team, there was some hope. There was some promise, certainly back in November and December, but I don't know that we've ever seen a Terps team as decimated by injuries and by sort of misfortune like this team, and they keep losing on the road, and they're piling up right now. This loss in Nebraska, and the worst part about it, night after night, these are all games that they could have, should have, might have won, right?
They really are. They're just not quite good enough. I mean, they haven't been blown out, other than against teams where you would kind of expect them to get blown out. These teams like Nebraska, like Penn State last week, I mean, these aren't great teams. I don't want to try to misconstrue that, but they're competitive teams, and Maryland's been competitive.
Well, they're also fully constructed. Maryland's not, right? Literally.
Right. I mean, Nebraska's a team that improved to 11-4 in the conference, a team that's fighting for an NCAA tournament appearance, a team that's kind of trying to crack the top 25. Kind of rare territory for the Cornhuskers in basketball,
sure.
Anyway. But I mean, this Terps team they have such a small margin for error, and I'm not making excuses because I think there's still something to be said about this team not doing the little things well. The fact that they're in these close games late, but they never get over the hump. I think there's certainly fingers that can be pointed there, and some of the same criticisms we've had about Mark Turgeon in the past can apply this year. But the reality is when you have so little depth in the front court and you're counting on players like Dion Wiley and Jared Nickens to play some pretty extensive minutes for you. We've seen Joshua Tomajic play some extensive minutes at times, although he didn't on Tuesday night. You're just relying on a lot of guys that, frankly, under normal circumstances, would kind of just be space fillers. They come in and have a few minutes here or there, and that's about it. But it's really tough for the Terps on a Tuesday night when Kevin Herter was dealing with foul trouble, and obviously that limited his minutes a little bit more and limits what he's going to do on the defensive end a little bit more when he's trying not to foul out of a ball game. And Anthony Cowan wasn't very good. So you're talking about your two best players that are healthy and on the floor. Now, Bruno Fernando was terrific after kind of a rough start to Tuesday's game, but it just really illustrates that for this team, especially on the road. At home, it's a little different story. They played pretty well at home. They haven't lost games really that they were supposed to win playing at home. But on the road, such a small margin for error. You get a guy in foul trouble. One of your best players is a little bit off, even with Fernando playing so well. But still, it was right there for the taking at the end. And I'll point to Herter makes the layup with about 12 seconds to go. And they took 6 seconds to foul. I mean, what are you doing there? I mean, it's just things like that, bad possessions, turnovers in crucial situations. Those are the things that I point to and say, well, even with all the injuries, even with everything they've dealt with to this point, I'm still not seeing them improve in some of those big moments. And that's where it's a little more disheartening because so many of these games that they've lost, and they've lost 7 road games in a row now, the only road win that they have in the Big Ten, the only road win they have, period, is that Illinois game back in early December that, frankly, they were fortunate to win. And the Illini are just a terrible team in the Big Ten. You're not seeing the growth in some of those little things that you'd like to see a team improve on as they get better. So they're just not a very good basketball team. And I think Tuesday night, if they win Tuesday night's game, not saying they're in the tournament by any stretch of the imagination, but that's a nice win. Maybe you gather a little momentum, finish up the regular season strong, and then you get into the Big Ten tournament and try to make a run. Not saying you necessarily would have to win it, but they lose Tuesday night, and It's very clear at this point. This team, short of winning the Big Ten tournament, they're not going to be playing in March, at least in the tournament that matters, that people care about.
Well, you look at the other teams and the other players, and look, we don't see Nebraska play often, but that kid Palmer's a great player, right? He was the best player on the floor, and I go back to Maryland history. I don't really remember. And look, Melo Trimble played injured 2 years ago, and I think we look at that and say, all right, injuries affected his game, his legs, all that stuff. I don't really remember a Maryland season that was this decimated, where you got a guy like Wiley you probably don't even want on the floor at all, playing 36 minutes on the road in the middle of February in the games that matter, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's kind of crazy when you think about it. And look, I mean, Dion Wiley, what could have been for his career had he been able to stay healthier over his time in College Park? Who knows? But certainly not someone that you were kind of identifying going into the season that, yeah, that guy's going to be playing 36 minutes every single night. It was much more a case of, okay, he's going to play some, but you're going to have Justin Jackson playing, that 3/4 role at times, depending on what kind of lineup you want to have in there. And you were hoping that Daryl Morcell would be the one that is playing that many minutes. Well, Morcell is also playing that many minutes, so it shows you the needs that they've had, and it's not an excuse, but it's part of the equation. I mean, it has to be. You can't just say, well, next man up. I mean, we talk about that with the Ravens at a sport like football all the time, but basketball, I mean, you only have so many scholarship players, and you have a few injuries. Keep in mind, Tchaikovsky's just coming back from the heel injury, the Achilles issue that he was dealing with for 3 games. So it's clear that he's not quite right. He only played 7 minutes. So, I mean, it's just not there for the Terps. And some of that, you can certainly point to Mark Turgeon at little things here and there. I won't completely absolve him, but at the same time, he was supposed to have Justin Jackson, who was a player testing the NBA waters last spring, and he was supposed to have Yvonne Bender at least giving them some depth. And you were hoping Tchaikovsky could stay a little more healthy, although that's been the story of his career. So, I mean, it's just, and oh yeah, you're also replacing Melo Trimble, who was a pretty important figure in the Mark Turgeon era. So, I mean, it's just not there for them. And it's frustrating because you look at these close games and they're not getting blown out. I mean, it's not as though they're awful, but they're just not good enough to win these games on the road. They're not good enough to win close games. And whether it's to have someone that they can just fully trust down the stretch. I mean, Cowan and Herter have done very commendable work this year, but they've been asked to do so much. I mean, Anthony Cowan's playing almost 40 minutes every single time out. Herter's playing most of the minutes, other than Tuesday
when he gets
night.
in foul trouble.
yeah, he gets into some foul trouble, and he still played 32 minutes. By the way, it's not as though he didn't play. It's just they had to take him out at a couple points, and it's going to affect how you play defense. It's going to affect your game when you're in foul trouble like that. So those two are really, really, really good Big Ten players, but there's just not enough around him. I guess the silver lining, and I mentioned it in passing, but Bruno Fernando, probably not someone that Turgeon anticipated playing this much, given that Justin Jackson was supposed to be a major part of what they did. But you see what Fernando did, and I mean, he's had his ups and downs. He's a freshman. I mean, he's had some rough performances. He's had some games where he's been all but shut out. But I mean, 21 points, 9 boards. That's the kind of game you hope that gives him an opportunity to grow moving forward. It makes him better in the future. So, at this point, you're kind of in that silver lining territory. Certainly they can play for the NIT and things like that. And look, until they're eliminated from the Big Ten tournament, you don't completely say they have no shot. But I think it's pretty obvious where this team is, and I think it's been pretty obvious for a while. But Tuesday kind of felt like maybe that last chance to kind of get themselves not a signature win, but a good win on the road, and see if you can kind of get things rolling a little bit. But they just, they haven't been able to create any momentum because you can't win any road games. It's the Captain Obvious statement. I mean, what exactly is about your profile is going to make you even remotely attractive to the NCAA tournament committee or anything like that? So, again, most of that discussion was just about done anyway, and I think Tuesday night kind of felt like the final nail in the coffin as far as this team putting together any kind of an argument for an at-large bid. I think that's pretty obvious. That ship has sailed.
But I would say, look, the Big Ten smells better right now than maybe it did 8 weeks ago, where we looked at it and said, well, there's Michigan State, and there's Purdue, and there's everyone else, right? Like, Ohio State's been the biggest surprise team in the country. Michigan State's been solid. Purdue's been solid. Michigan's come on, to your point. Nebraska's smelling the top 25 for the, a rarefied air in Lincoln, Nebraska, for sure, and certainly played the part. And I said that kid Palmer looks to be among the 5 best players I've seen in the Big Ten this year, outside of an Ohio State or a Purdue or Michigan State. And the conference has been better against the grade. But that being said, these bad teams, the doormats, of which Maryland is sort of kind of one of them at this point, but Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, Rutgers, Illinois, these teams also, and Penn State's been better, right? But all those teams stink, and they're getting feasted on by Ohio State, Michigan State, and Purdue, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just been such a top-heavy conference. I mean, those teams at the very top that you mentioned have been really, really good.
But we didn't see that coming at all, man, right?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's impossible to predict. I mean, it's always tough. I always find, and look, I'm not going to try to pretend to be a college basketball expert where I'm following the entire country and know everyone's RPI, et cetera. But I think there was certainly some anticipation of. I think Michigan State's the obvious one. Purdue was a little more interesting, but I think most people still thought they'd be good, just maybe not number 1 caliber team in the country good or number 1 seed caliber good, as they've gotten a lot of discussion there, before the Michigan State game. Ohio State's, for me, I mean, that's obviously the big surprise. I mean, they're 13-1 in the conference. That's been crazy to see that. But you're right. I mean, it's just so top heavy. You have those 3 heavyweights. Nebraska and Michigan are pretty good, but they're not. Neither of those teams are special. Neither of those teams you really feel, even if they get in the tournament, are serious threats to make a run. And then after that, it's just a lot of mediocrity. Penn State, Indiana, Northwestern, Maryland. And then you kind of have a little more drop-off after that with Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, Rutgers, go down to the bottom. So, but you're right, though. I mean, as good as those teams are at the top, certainly you look at their conference records, and this isn't a case like you think about the old ACC years where Maryland, Duke, North Carolina, Wake Forest were all good, and you'd have 5 or 6 teams that kind of would beat up on each other. This is very much a top-heavy conference where those teams at the top are really good, really good to great,
and really good at home.
Yeah, and well, the home road thing, that's something you see that for the most part in many conferences around the nation, but that line is very distinct, and I think instead of most years where you might have 1 or 2 great teams at the top and you still have 5 or 6 good teams, it's much more 3 great teams, I think 2 okay teams, and then everyone else is just blah. And Maryland's not terrible, but they're certainly in that tier where they're very, very underwhelming. Especially,
but for so many of these teams to be 0-6, 0-7, 1-6, I mean, it's dreggy this year at the bottom for whatever reason. And Maryland wouldn't be so dreggy if they had their full complement of players.
Well, there's that, and I mean, like I said, I mean, they haven't won a road game since early December. I mean, they haven't won a road game in over 2 months. I mean, that's crazy. And even with the injuries, you look at some of those road losses, those games were sitting there. I mean, okay, Ohio State, no. Michigan State, no. But look at the Michigan game. Look at the Indiana game. I mean, these were some really winnable games for them. I mean, even the Purdue game, they competed. I mean, they didn't get embarrassed. But I mean, Penn State. I mean, these are some games you'd like to think, if you're well coached and even with the injuries that you're improving as the year is going on, you'd like to think you could have stole at least one or 2 of those, and it just hasn't happened for them. And 7 straight road losses. It's pretty clear. I mean, this is a team that's not even all that close to being on the bubble, let alone having any semblance of a real chance to make the NCAA tournament. So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just I think resignation. I think is set in for a while. But again, Tuesday was just the latest reminder of that. Another winnable game, but they weren't good enough down the stretch, and that's crazy. Now Nebraska did a great job hitting free throws, but the final 5 minutes, the Huskers didn't have a field goal, and Maryland still couldn't pull out a win. It's just not good enough.
This would be the part where we play, taps for the Terps, because it's gotten as ugly as we thought it was going to get 4 or 5 weeks ago when they started losing basketball players. On to the gridiron. We'll move off the Terps. Luke Jones, of course, joining us here. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net. No locker rooms for you to cover right now, right? I mean, Sarasota, we have pitcher and catchers reporting. We have the Ravens in this netherworld of studying film, studying tape, and heading off to the Combine. And, of course, Luke and I will be broadcasting from Indianapolis and Lucas Oil Field all week, 2 weeks from now during the Combine. And we're gearing up for that. Going from Minnesota to Indianapolis, I don't know if that's a trade up or down, Luke. We'll find out when we get the weather. It can't be worse, right? I mean, weather-wise, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, those days when we were catching the shuttle over to the Mall of America and it was minus 8 degrees at 7:30 in the morning, I'm just, whew.
Dude, you had to know, like, when you left on Friday, that I would be sick within, 72 hours of leaving Minnesota, right? So I'm still trying to get over the chest cold. You didn't get sick, did you?
I didn't. I was really surprised by that. I mean, it
was all that mall food that kept you healthy, I think.
Well, it was that, and then on Super Bowl Sunday, I ate plenty of chicken wings. That's the breakfast or the meal of a champion right there.
Well, yeah, that's why we have Royal Farms as a sponsor here. All of our programming brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank, as well as Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. They even have Royal Farms in Shrewsbury, where Luke lives. Make sure you're using that Rofo app and gassing up and chickening up and coughing up as well. I caught you over Pizza John's last week too. And I was a little upset because I didn't have Pizza John's that day. I had a head cold.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it so much on Radio Row. I had to go get it. Pizza John's fixed. But, yeah, I mean, this is just for someone like me who, I mean, obviously I cover the Ravens and the Orioles for the station, and that's really that's a 365-day a year endeavor, at least with the Ravens. I mean, the Orioles, I guess, off season maybe not.
As the guy who employs you, I agree with everything you're saying.
Right. But that said, this is, for me personally, just as a sports fan, this is always the weird time of year for me.
Well, unless you like the Olympics, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I have nothing against the Olympics per se. Certainly corruption, and you can get into some of those parts of the discussion, but it's just not something that I have a whole lot of. It doesn't appeal to me a whole lot. The summer game's a little bit different. There's at least some there, but the winter games, and me, I'm not a big hockey guy, but I always enjoyed hockey, but not having the NHL players in it, that's a little. That just makes it a little underwhelming for me.
My wife didn't even realize that. She's like, when are they stopping hockey? I'm like, they're not. She's like, I thought they did. And, I mean, the meandering in and out of what the rules are and who's peeing in the bottle, and the Russians are Russian, but they're not really Russian.
Yeah.
Tomato cans running down the ramp, shredding and all that stuff. It's lost on me. I mean, I'm sort of – I'm the guy always waiting for baseball, and I guess as I've gotten older and angrier here, I'm really sort of furious with the Orioles right now. Like every day I sit here with my fingers and I'm about to let into them the way they deserve to be let into, the way they would if they were in Boston or New York and they weren't trying, which they're not trying right now. It's a disgraceful thing the Orioles are doing to the fan base right now.
Well, like I said, for me, it's not even so much the quote, not trying, it's what's your direction? What are you doing exactly? If you're not going for it this year, and look, that's a completely fair conclusion to draw. If you flat out say, you know what, even if we add a starting pitcher or two, we're not going to be good enough. We're going to be losing Manny Machado if we don't trade him. Certainly you say the same about Zach Britton, who's hurt right now, but again, kind of reiterated recently that thinks he's going to be pitching before the All-Star break. We'll see. But Brad Brock, Adam Jones, we know the characters. To me, if you're not going for it, then you need to go in the opposite direction and rebuild, start reloading, start getting younger, start getting some younger pieces that can help you for some of these guys that are going to be gone. This in-between territory is what really concerns me. I said this to you the other day when we were talking about it. It's not, at this point, it's not difficult envisioning a scenario where they're mediocre, not awful, but certainly not good enough to feel good about their chances to make it as a wild card. But we know, mathematically speaking, with that second wild card, you don't have to have a very good record to kind of still view yourself, if you want to look through that lens.
But you better have 5 pitchers.
Well, I agree. Look, I'm not saying this isn't me saying they're going to be a contender. This is me saying that it's not that terribly difficult in baseball to be just mediocre enough that in late July you're only 4.5 games out of the second wild card, even if there are 6 teams ahead of you in that hierarchy. And my fear is they're still going to figure out a way to be in that kind of territory, and that might be 4 games under 500 in late July. And then Peter Angelo says, well, we're not trading Manny Machado. We're not trading Zach Britton. We're going for it. But they're not
I'm
really
not convinced they're going to get a lot from Machado at this point anyway. You know, like I'm not convinced that this won't be the Juan Bell kind of trade, because I don't think anyone's going to rent Manny Machado for 8 weeks, given the position. I mean, if Arenado breaks his leg, okay, but I still don't think the Rockies would want to trade half their farm away for 8 weeks of rental of Manny Machado. I can't envision a scenario, and it will take a miraculous scenario, and I don't think they would deal him to the Yankees or the Red Sox no matter what happens, because the old man's crazy, right?
Well, now the second part of it, as far as dealing to the Yankees or the Red Sox, I mean, that's certainly something that to be said about that, where I'm not going to dispute that. I'd kind of believe it when I see it. But the argument you're making is basically saying that no team ever gets any value for a rental. That's not true. There's certainly plenty of examples you can find of rentals now.
But the pitchers have become way more cool in that case than dealing for a position player. Everyone wants pitching in August, right?
Okay, fair enough. But you're again, let's not make Manny Machado out to be that he's Melvin Mora.
This isn't Will Clark at the end of his run. I agree.
This is a transcendent player. I mean, you can certainly find examples of rentals of position players that certainly fetched a nice piece or two. I mean, believe me, I'm not saying that they're going to be able to trade him and rebuild their farm system with that trade. What I'm saying is, that there's definitely scenarios like you mentioned, whether it's an injury, whether it's a team that's just one dynamic bat away. And the fact that he's going to be playing shortstop now, I mean, it's a bat that you can plug in at shortstop or third base, depending on that team. I don't think it's far-fetched whatsoever to think that they couldn't get a good return. Now, are they going to get a return that's miraculous, that's going to set like a Herschel Walker trade kind of return? No, of course not. But I go back to, I still think they're going to end up signing a veteran pitcher at least, an Andrew Cashner type. I think they'll do that, at least that much. And
I fully agree with that. I said to somebody the other day, I was in a meeting and they were talking about, I'm like, they're going to spend $12 million on some pitcher that's going to go 10-16. But
right.
who would sign up to be here other than someone tremendously desperate? Because when you sign up here as a Sammy Sosa or Vladimir Guerrero or a Jim Thome or even a Nelson Cruz, you stand the possibility of looking good with the bat. As a pitcher, there's no upside to signing here to say, I'm going to resurrect my career in the Orioles rotation, in that ballpark, in that division, and then go get a 3-year, $40 million deal. That's not going to happen here.
Well, I think that's fair, but at the same time, there are so many pitchers out there that still need jobs right now. So, at some point, it's kind of that same argument where you say, well, it's one of 30 places I can play right now, and if they're the only one offering me X amount of money, even if it's not a long-term deal, then,
you just said the key. The only would be the word. Only. I mean, there are only a few places.
I think you're being a little unfair there. I mean, come on. Let's not act like this team's lost 100 games 4 straight years. But I hear what you're saying, and a lot of it doesn't even have to do with the Orioles or Camden Yards. A lot of it has to do with you're going to be pitching against the Red Sox and the Yankees a heck of a lot.
Of course.
That's always the challenge. I don't think this is the least desirable destination, clear cut. I mean, I think there's lots of places you could talk about that. I mean, but that said, it's certainly a challenge. Certainly something that's we're going to have to see how this plays out. They're no stranger to making a late off-season, early spring training kind of move. They've done that all over and over. The positive is there's a lot of supply out there. The negative is there's still a lot of demand elsewhere out there. Whenever this market finally starts to move, and you would assume it does here shortly with Yu Darvish finally, that domino finally falling. But getting back to my point, they could add another starting pitcher, and even if it is Miguel Castro and Chris Tillman filling out the rotation in addition to whoever else they get, keep in mind, this team was so historically poor with its starting rotation last year. I would say right now, not even knowing who the back three guys in the rotation are going to be, I think this starting rotation will have a better ERA than it did last year. Doesn't mean I think it'll be good. I still think it'll be very bad. But my point is there's an addition by subtraction thing here. So my fear is, getting back to my big picture point of this team being stuck in the middle of not really going for it but not selling to this point, is I'm afraid that they're going to be not good enough but not terrible enough that they'll stand pat at the deadline or try to make some kind of Gerardo Parra kind of trade instead of doing what they need to do with Machado and Britton and Brock. And that's going to end up being really, really disappointing. And for the big picture, it's going to be just maybe not disastrous, because I think that ship sailed as far as getting great returns for these guys. But it's going to be very, very disappointing if it plays out that way. Because but me saying that doesn't mean that I think they have any real semblance of a chance to be a serious contender. And like I said, I'm not sure there's a pitcher or two out there that they could sign where I'm necessarily going to change my mind on that point. I just think this division's too tough at this point in time.
All right, look, I've saved the best for last, and I don't really want you to talk a lot about this at all, but we need to talk about it. The Ravens are going to play at the always important deciding fifth preseason game first, and they want us all to leave early on a bus to go to Canton to watch worse fake football. I would think the only one less excited about this than me would be John Harbaugh.
Yeah, John Harbaugh is going to like the extra set of practices, the extra week of practice, but it's another opportunity, another week to get players injured. I'm not going to say too much about it because, look, if we have folks who want to go out to the Hall of Fame game, by all means, check out our trip options at WNST.net. It's going to be a great time as far as the weekend as a whole, but I'll just throw this out there just because I wouldn't be doing my due diligence. The two teams that took part in the Hall of Fame game last year, Dallas and Arizona, each rested upwards of 30 players in that game. So you do the math who those 30 players were. They weren't rookie free agents. They weren't their backups. It was their starters and their key backups, most of them not even taking the field. So I'm just throwing that disclaimer out there. Fake football, if you don't love four fake football games, well, let's throw another one into the mix and see what happens there. But rest assured, even if you are excited about doing it, and hey, it's a first-time experience for the Ravens. Anyone who hasn't been out to Canton, if you just want to make it a longer weekend, knock yourself out. But just keep in mind,
it's fake football.
You're expecting to see Joe Flacco and C.J. Mosley and Eric Weddle and go down the list. Even guys like Alex Collins, you're not going to be seeing those guys on the field that Thursday night.
Yeah, everything's on sale at the road trip stat. I'm not discouraging people. I'll probably be on the Thursday bus. I'll probably go to that game, but everyone has selected the Friday bus, but now the Thursday bus available because we knew they were playing in this game. Everybody did. And the Urlacher thing, I'm assuming a lot of the Bears fans will, take Friday off and drive, 5 hours from Chicago, whatever it is, over to Canton and see an Urlacher get in. The Bears don't put a lot of guys in the Hall of Fame either now, right?
Yeah, you think about the Bears, their history, it's much more going back to the monsters of the Midway and the 85 Bears. It's been a lot more, they've had a lot of lean years here, lean decades here, quite frankly, for the Bears. But, yeah, I think you and I we've talked about the Ravens being in the Hall of Fame game probably before last season even came to an end, knowing that possibility, assuming Ray was going to be a lock. And for me, it was more so, is it going to be the Bears? I wasn't positive that Urlacher was going to be a first ballot. I thought the Vikings would have been a possibility with Randy Moss. The Eagles with Dawkins. But I think the Ravens were pretty logical there, knowing that they had never been in the Hall of Fame game. In fact, I was going back and doing the research. The last time a Baltimore team in the Hall of Fame game, the Colts back in, I think, 82, were in the Hall of Fame game. So
who went in the Hall of Fame that year for the Colts? It had to be somebody, right?
I'm not
It wouldn't
sure.
have been Unitas at that point. I mean, I don't know who would have retired. It had to have been somebody going into the Hall of Fame, I would think, right? That's the way they've always done it.
They typically do it that way. I don't know. I mean, I think it just depends on the year a lot of times. Most of the time there's someone involved. I didn't research that part of it. That was just my useless trivia that I was going to give to you for the day. But, yeah, I mean, it's a Hall of Fame game. I don't want to be, I don't want to crush it too much because, hey, anyone who wants to go out to that, knock yourself out.
It would be nice that they play football when they're inducting people. It just sucks that it's preseason football, right?
Yeah, exactly. I did see someone suggest on Twitter when the news came out that the way that you could really make that game fun was have Ray Lewis and Brian Urlacher suit up for their respective teams. Make it a little bit of a throwback flavor. That'd be pretty fun. But,
by the way, the 82 class was Doug Atkins, Sam Huff, George Musso, and Merlin Olsen. So, I mean, for what that's worth, I mean, boy, the last Colt to go in, all the Colts went in real early because they all played in the 50s and 60s. So, you go back to the first class was 63, and I would think in the 70s we had people going in the Hall of Fame all the time, right? I mean, literally.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about that class, those Hall of Fame Baltimore Colts. I mean, most of them were slam dunk choices.
Marchetti was 72, Barry was 73, Parker was 73, Lenny Moore was 75. I'm just going through this here. I'm just for Unitas was 79.
I was going to say Unitas. I thought 78 or 79.
And Curtis Dickey didn't get in. So I'm making that up. So. Luke, rest up, dude. I mean, we don't give you a lot of rest around here at WNST, so chill it out a little bit. We'll keep you busy 2 weeks from now. We get together out in Indianapolis and freeze again, all right?
Yeah, and maybe when we're out there, the Orioles will not sign a player like Dexter Fowler a couple years ago. We'll see. They're going to sign someone eventually. I'm just not sure it's going to be someone that.
Here's my prediction: something fiasco-ish is going to happen before the end of spring training. That's just my whatever that. It's the Orioles. Something weird that's going to be inexplicable for anyone else. But we'll just say, oh, that's just the way they run. Like a general manager trying to leave and they keep him for 3 years. Things like that. Little things like that.
All bets are off. I'm not going to dispute that one. You're prepared for anything.
You've come around to my way of thinking because you've had your eyes open. I appreciate that. Luke, we'll see you soon. Rest up.
Have a good one.
Baltimore Luke. Luke at WNST.net is the way to find him. I love when I have to go to the internet and Google stuff to figure out that Johnny U went into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in '79. So the little things you learn here when I'm trying to figure things out as well. We're out in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere you are. The morning newspaper shipping to thousands of people every morning. Sign up for that at WNST.net. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Last but never least, whenever they trade Manny Machado or sign a pitcher, you'll get it first on the WNST tech service. I'm sorry it's a punchline. I don't run the team. I just complain about the team. I don't set the morale here. I just lower it. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here to raise the morale from 3 until 5 this Thursday. It is the SSV on WNST. All of our programming brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank, sponsoring our community reports. We're going to begin those on Thursdays in March, as well as Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Got the fried chicken, got the app. Download that app. It'll save you dough when you're pumping gas. Everybody needs to save money pumping gas. And there's a Royal Farms right around the corner from you because it's real fresh, real fast. It's Royal Farms. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.